Omakase, the life and words of author M. Karen. If this is our first time meeting each other, let me give you a brief introduction. My name is Max. I write books for a living. If you checked in with us last week, yes, I am still in revision hell. My pronouns are they, them. While on the subject of hell, when I was young, at the recommendation of my father, I actually ended up reading The Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, or rather the first part of it being Infierno, or Inferno, I guess. In Spanish it was called Infierno. And I actually didn't get most of it, mostly because that book is Dante Alighieri roasting political and religious figures of his time. Let me tell you, I remember spending more time reading the footnotes explaining who was who and why Dante was roasting them than actually reading the prose, though a lot of it was really nice, I remember. Anyhow, hi there, welcome to Omakase, my writing advice and inspiration podcast. I'm your host, M. Karen. If you're unfamiliar with the format of this podcast, it's pretty simple. It's broken into 3 segments. The first one is all about my week, what I've been doing, what I've been writing, or rather editing, a little bit of insight into my creative process. The second segment is viewer questions sent by lovely people like you. Today we'll be talking about the motivation to write and what to do when we receive comments or feedback that make us feel as though people don't connect with our writing. The second question is going to be about brainstorming and outlining a novel, particularly how long should it take to outline a novel, at least by my method. And of course, the last segment of the show is the prompt. Today we're going to be doing a little bit of what I call flash brainstorming. It's almost as though there's a segue between question number 2 and the final segment, but don't take my word for it. I may not be clever enough to pull that off this week. Also, before I go on anywhere, 2 pieces of housekeeping. The first one is that the song that you hear at the beginning and at the end of the show is titled Dream of Green by the OC Jazz Collective and OCRemix.org. You can find the link to this song and countless of other free-to-download video game remixes in the link in the description of this podcast and or video. The second bit is that there's also a link in the description to treat me to a cup of coffee, one-time donation. If you enjoy this show, you can treat me to a one-time donation, a cup of coffee or a cup of tea. And now, with all that stuff out of the way, let's dive right into the first segment of the show, my week. What have I been doing? What have I been working on? Quick answer to that, mostly revision. Most weeks I don't have a lot of, Most weeks I don't have a lot of practical advice to bring into my weekly segment, but this week is completely different, so we're kind of flipping things upside down. Instead of spending 10 minutes talking about, the show that I watched, instead you get to listen to me talk about what I did this week for like 20 seconds. And take the following, as a reminder to back up your writing, back up everything that you have and that you care for. As a little bit of a really quick anecdote. I love playing video games. Video games is one of my favorite ways to decompress after work and just relax. It's hard to relax, particularly playing video games, when your hard drive gets corrupted and you have to reinstall the OS on your console and, in turn, lose every single save game data that you had. Consider this a great reminder to back up your game saves, back up your writing, back up those photos that you really care for, because once they're gone forever. Thankfully, I had backed up most of my saves, except for the saves of one particular game that we may or may not, my lovely wife and I may or may not be recording videos of. So we've been spending part of this week just catching up. But that is that. Let's talk about actual writing stuffs. I've been dedicating myself fully to the revision of this novel, and I have a lot to say about the revision process. I'm down there in the trenches in revision hell. And I had a really fun experience. And by fun, I mean terrible experience revising. I knew going into revision that there were several things that I was not confident at all about my story. And this is what you do. This is what happens. You write a novel. In my case, I transcribed it because I wrote it by hand. And in between jumping into the act of revision and finishing the novel, I knew in my mind there are some issues here and there. One of those issues was the voice of the main antagonist for this story. I knew, and she doesn't formally show up in the story until like chapter 10 out of 14. She's kind of like a looming shadow above everybody's heads. Is that how the metaphor goes? It's fine, listen. She's kind of a looming threat up until that point. And when she finally speaks, I knew in my heart, when I finished transcribing the novel, this is gonna take a lot of work. And in my heart I knew that, but in my brain I thought, no, how bad can it be? You know, sometimes you worry a lot about revision, and rightfully so, sometimes things don't turn out to be as big of a problem as you thought. Other times you are terribly, horribly, awfully, dreadfully wrong. This was one of those times. Every single line of dialogue spoken by the antagonist had to be rewritten. An entire monologue had to be cut out. Just the way that she was before, the way that I wrote her originally during the first draft, did not align anymore with the tone of the story. She kinda sounded like a cartoon character, and I can't have that. And what is it that I say every time? What's our job here? What are we doing here? To tell good stories. And to make good stories great. And I looked over the antagonist's dialogue and I'm like, this just won't do. This is not the person who I want as the foil to the protagonist. You're supposed to represent a lot more. You're supposed to be way better than this. And in my heart, I really want this antagonist to not only be a foil, but also be like the complete... is it value? Belief? The complete opposite when it comes to the beliefs of the main character, but not in a way as in like good versus bad. They are both of these characters are right in what they believe in, and I think that their approach is correct. Both of them are correct, and it is because there's conflict between their incompatible goals that the story kind of propels itself. And I wanted her to sound right. Part of her approach you can disagree with, but you can't particularly disagree with her methods. So going into revision, I'm like, you're supposed to sound like you are right, and your beliefs are supposed to align with your approach, and they were not. They were not. There was a lot of fixing there. And take this as a great reminder that revision is a lot of hard work, but I think it's worth it. The antagonist now, I think I've pretty much rewritten 90% of what she's gonna say. There's still a little bit of her talking at the very end of the story, and I have to kind of pick up through that in the course of the next couple of days. But I'm really happy with how she sounds like. She sounds way more human, she sounds way more understandable. There's way less exclamation marks, way less very obvious threats of violence, and way more just heartfelt pieces of dialogue that just... they make her way better, way more interesting, and I am way more proud of her. I have kind of built a small group of friends, writerly friends, who give me feedback on my work, and for the first time in forever, my wife and I are talking about doing collaborative projects and stuff like that, and I haven't released a book in forever, and I am really looking forward to give this to my wife to read. I want her feedback on it. You might argue that she's the person whose opinion I respect the most, and I wanna, as I'm editing the story, I want the characters to sound good. I want their beliefs to be clear and understandable, and I want the conflict to be tangible. And I guess in my mind, as I'm working through the revision, I'm thinking of what my lovely spouse is going to think, what some of my betas are going to think, and not so much catering the story to their tastes. That's not what I do. But rather, imagine what their concerns might be and working to preemptively adjust the story. As I've said before, and I'll say it again, when I go into revision, I want to make it the best story possible. I want to make it the best for my beta readers who are dedicating their time, very limited free time, to reading my work. I want to reward them with an amazing story where they can just focus on the storytelling. Not the inconsistencies, not the typos, not the sentence structure. I want them to focus on the story. The real stuff that actually takes the most work. Oh man, I'm getting really crimson. It always bothers me. It always bothers me. I've known people who were super guilty of this, and it always baffled me. The idea that they would send writing that wasn't ready for feedback. And I'm just sitting there like, you could have spent a day or two just actually clearing the typos and sentence structure before you send it out to people, instead of wasting everyone's time, because everybody's going to be pointing out the typos and the sentence structure, or the flaw in your sentence structure. It's the stuff that anyone can pick out, and instead of focusing on storytelling, people are going to be pointing that out. It feels like a waste, especially when people are dedicating their very limited free time to your book, to give you feedback, to help you make it better. I'm so crimson. I'm so crimson right now. I'm so mad. It's part of why, I guess you could say, in Spanish we say, un ejemplo de mal ejemplo, which means a good example of a bad example. And I've had a lot of those growing up. I've had a lot, and especially during my writing career, I've had a lot of really good examples of bad examples. Things that I don't want to do. So these are kind of the thoughts I keep in the back of my head when I'm going through revision. It's hard. Like, I think I was joking on Twitter about how, like, I've added so much writing to this novel. I've rewritten every line of dialogue. And it's funny, because I've added a lot of writing, but I also cut a bunch of writing of the antagonist. Like, she had a whole monologue at the end. Or during the climax, excuse me. And, like, all of that's gone. I was like, yo, girl, you're going on for like 2 pages. I can't have 2 pages of you just talking. This can't go on. So imagine me doing the little sound. I'm doing a hand motion, or with my fingers, I guess, as though the blades of a scissor closing down. So just cut that out. 2 pages of monologue. Not while I'm on the clock. That's not gonna happen. But ironically so, I've added so much writing to this book. I think last time I joked that I added 20% more words to the manuscript as of today, and I spent all of today editing, and as of today, I have added 24, almost 25% more words, and that's crazy. That's crazy. This book has gone from being like my standard novella length to being like one of the longest ones I've written. So, or one of the longest ones I've published, because I've written way longer books than this one. They're just not published yet. So, I know that I've gone really long on my update, but I figured, you know what? I bet you want to hear me talk about revision. So here's a great reminder to dedicate yourself fully to it. Jump in. If it takes a while, that's fine. Because your beta readers are only gonna get to read it for the first time once. And I want the best first impression. That right there is the goal. One more thing. In regards to personal productivity, one of the things that I've been doing for a couple of weeks now, and I wanted to wait a little bit before reporting on it. As you know, I use a modified version of the bullet journal to keep track of my daily tasks and reminders and all that stuff. And I've used countless systems over the course of the last 2-3 years. And I've kind of stolen some of the really good tools from a different system and just put them into my bullet journal. There is a motivational/inspirational system called the 5-Minute Journal. And it's a little journal. that basically forces you to ask a set of questions every single morning. And I love those questions so much that I just have them on my daily pages on my bullet journal. And those 3 questions are, again, when you sit down to prepare yourself for the rest of the day and you plan over your tasks and you check your reminders, you write the following 3 questions and answer them. What would make today great? What would make today great? And you answer that. What would make today great? And what's helped me, asking that question helps me just ground myself and be like, okay, well, if I only did one thing that would make today a great day, because life always happens, life always gets in the way. I was tweeting recently about how I thought I was going to have a normal Wednesday, and then I spent the rest of the day in a scavenger hunt. Life happens. But if you could do one thing that would make today great, what would it be? And sometimes it's not even work related. Sometimes it's doing things like making that call, meeting up with that friend, checking in with someone, sending that letter, finally reading that email you've been dreading. If you did one thing, what would it be? That really helps. The other 2 items are less dramatic, but they're still very important, at least to me. The second item in that list is gratefulness. What am I grateful for today? Starting with a little bit of gratefulness helps, mostly because it helps you, again, ground yourself. And no matter how hard things may seem sometimes, there's always something to be positive about. And I know, sometimes it may seem a little silly to receive that advice, especially if you're dealing with mental illness, things beyond our control, a chemical imbalance in your brain that really can't be solved by just positive thinking. And I deal with that. And I know where you are at. Sometimes to me, it just helps to just remind myself, yo, I have a roof over my head. I get to do this thing. Today I am grateful that I get to record a podcast where I get to talk about the thing I love the most, writing. And I'm not trying to make myself sound better than I am, but if you have a little bit of time to listen to this, I think it's good to be grateful to have the time to listen to something, the time to sit down, the time to just walk your dog. It's important to be grateful for things. And I am endlessly grateful for the roof over my head and the lovely wife who makes my life so amazing. The last item on the 5-minute journal that I've adapted into my bullet journal is affirmations. It's just good to remind yourself of, or to give yourself a little bit of affirmations. I can do this. I am on the right path. Always phrasing it as I. And these 3 items, they help that you write them by hand. Because there is a whole documented a series of studies that talk about how you, by writing things down with your hands, helps your brain actually acknowledge them as being real and tangible in the world, as opposed to just typing. It was part of why writing by hand helped me so much. Oh man, that's actually something I'll be talking about relatively soon. But affirmations. I can do this. I will get this done. I am on the right path. Little affirmations. Because, and I think we're all at this point, sometime or another, sometimes we don't have anyone to give us that affirmation. And sometimes we have to pick ourselves up. And that's okay. Life gets in the way. Life is hard. And it helps, at least from my point of view, to start my mornings grounded, being a little bit extra grateful, and affirming myself that no matter how daunting a task may seem, how scary the world may appear, especially through the screen of a phone and a scrolling lists of messages and headlines, no matter how scary the world may seem, we can defeat it one day at a time. Okay? I also recommend just looking into the 5-minute journal. The other counterpart to that is the productivity planner, which I've used a little. I kind of adapted that naturally because I really liked it. I recommend looking into them. You actually don't have to buy the journals that the person sells. You can just literally adapt the system. They talk about it on their website. But once again, that is the 5-minute journal and the productivity planner. And that's about it for my week. I really want to slide that in. I went a little bit longer than I needed to, but I hope that it served to be useful and helpful. And now, before we jump over to the second segment of the show, I want to talk about the people who make this podcast possible. You! Lovely viewers like you who pledge to my Patreon page are making this show possible. I don't have any other kind of sponsors. You're not going to hear me talking about Wix or Blue Apron on this particular podcast. I am funded through your donations. Patreon.com/mkaren is the #1 place to support me and what I do. By pledging just $1 a month, you get to listen to these podcasts a week before they go live on YouTube and iTunes and everywhere else, as well as many other perks. The following are some of the people who are pledging, who are being so endlessly amazing in their support, and I just can't help but give them a little shout out during this segment of the show. I would like to give a big shout out to Atalak. Atalak has a DeviantArt page. You can find out more about their writing and their art over at deviantart.com/AHTILAK. Also, new, super big sponsor, Isabella Doucette. Isabella Doucette has several novels on Smashwords. You can find them under the username ILMTDOUCETTE or just by searching Isabella Doucette. And now, a big shout out to the rest of my lovely sponsors. A. Howard, Alisa Dudley, Amelia, Angela, Brenda, Caitlin, Lishadra, Gilbert Gaudreau, Irina Phoenix, Joe, Lacey, Mark Maruska, Nicola, Pat Eichson, Polly Craftool, Soul Muse, and Synexia. And now, let's move on with the second part of the show, viewer questions. I take questions from Twitter, Tumblr, YouTube, pretty much anywhere you can leave a comment. Our first question today comes from one of my lovely patrons, and they were talking about receiving reviews on their books. Sometimes reviews that are very positive, and sometimes reviews that leave them feeling disheartened. And this patron wanted my advice on that particular situation, if I've experienced it myself, and whatever advice that I can provide to continue on moving forward with writing in spite of sometimes being hurt, sometimes being discouraged by these words, these reviews, this feedback aimed directly at us and our work. Have I dealt with this in the past? Of course! Not only through the many years that I took creative writing courses in college, but also, just having books out there. Sometimes you get... I'm trying not to attach a particularly colored word to this, or any kind of word that is too crimson. Feedback is feedback. And sometimes you get really good feedback, sometimes you get really bad feedback. And sometimes you get feedback that makes you wonder if someone was actually reading the book. And that's okay. I'm not saying that in a kind of bitter way. That happens. I mean, really, all you have to do is just look at the Amazon reviews for anything. Not even, like, novels. Just look at reviews for anything, and it makes you go, well, I feel like this person kind of missed the entire point of the product they purchased. Like, I think recently my wife and I bought a fan, and we were looking at the reviews on Amazon, and this one person left a 1-star review because the fan, it worked, it did what it was supposed to, but they didn't like the color of it. And I'm like, well, you could have seen what color the fan came in. I mean, there are photos there, and there are customer photos, and it seemed to me really silly to give that fan a 1-star review in spite of it being functional. in spite of it being exactly what it was advertised to be. So take that as a nice little microcosm of, the range a review can have. Have I gotten, I don't want to say useless reviews, because that's not true, but have I gotten reviews that were kind of ineffective? Yeah, of course I have. Sometimes that feedback came from people in a writing group. Like I said earlier, feedback is feedback. I'm not saying you have to look at everything people tell you. Like, as a matter of fact, I haven't checked review pages for certain books in forever. Mostly because some books that I published are really old. And also because, like, how do I say this? I mean, I wrote some of those books like 6 years ago. So it's the sort of thing where I'm like, feedback that I receive on 6-year-old writing may not be the most important to me at this current moment. But also because, I guess, like I mentioned earlier, I've had good examples of bad examples. I knew some writers who, and I'm not making the judgment call, I'm just saying that I knew some writers who would get bad reviews, and then they would not only blast the reviews on social media platforms, but also any kind of review that wasn't stellar, that wasn't entirely purely praising, completely demolished their desire to continue being a writer, which seemed to me a little silly. I guess it's because, at least from my point of view, I've had good examples. Not only the good examples of bad examples, but also just regularly good examples. One of the things that I've been saying forever, and one of the things that I took to heart at the very beginning of this journey, especially creating content on the internet, doing that really helps. Like running a blog, running a YouTube channel, running several YouTube channels, making this podcast. It has helped taking to heart the following truth. You have no control over how people react to your art. We all want everyone to love what we make. I think that's just an inherent human need for affirmation. But that's not gonna happen. You can try to make a book that everyone will love. You can try to make a book that only one person will like. And you can fail at that task in a myriad of ways. Because people are different. Because everybody's looking for something else, and sometimes it doesn't even have to deal with you. There are books that I've read in the most inefficient way possible. Like, you can spend forever trying to get the pacing of your book right, and you should try to get the pacing of your book as good as well, as effective as you can, but if someone picks your book, reads half of it in one sitting, and then reads the rest of it in like 10-minute chunks over the course of several weeks, pacing is going to be demolished at that point. And I'm not saying you shouldn't try. I'm saying that you should definitely make your story the best that you can. But you probably shouldn't stress over how people will react to your work. Some people will love what you make. Sometimes for reasons completely unrelated to what you actually put on the page. There might be people who will hate what you make for reasons completely unrelated to your writing. Sometimes people dislike your books for the kind of person you happen to be. And there will be a lot of people. There will be countless people who like what you do, but are silent about it. And I feel like that's something that I have to stress. And I mean, this is kind of like second nature for being on the internet, but a small, loud voices, a handful of small voices, can appear as though the expression of general opinion, when in reality they are not. They are the expressions of the people that speak them. And I can tell you, because I am guilty of this, not everybody who loves your book leaves a review. I have finished countless novels that I loved, and I have never stopped to leave a review. I try to, especially when it is indie books and books of people that I would like others to find out. And not only for that, but also for music and also for games. I want people to find them, and I want people to find positive feedback, so I leave that. Sometimes I don't. The people who leave reviews are the people who either really, really love your content or the people who really, 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 really hated it. So in that way, the review format as it exists is kind of polarizing. But all this conversation doesn't matter. Why? Because of this. We have no control over how people react to what we make. What we do have control over is continuing to make the art that we love, continuing to create the content that we want to see in the world. That right there is the only thing that should matter, to create the art we wish existed, and to continue creating that which our passions demand we make, to give form to the formless, shape to the shapeless, and through word and paper, fill that cup we call hope. At least that's what I do. I have gotten some really bad pieces of feedback, and not bad as in badly told, a little bit badly told, but also badly executed. I've had things where like I rate them, or like someone is like, Max, someone left this review in your book, and I'm like, why would you show me this? But secondly, wow, that person really didn't get what the book was about. Like, I strain over making sure that the foreshadowing is good, over making sure that the characters' voices make sense, and that everything is clear, and then someone comes out of the woodwork and goes, this book is about this thing, and I'm sitting there like, I definitely said the book wasn't about that. I'm pretty sure I had a character say that the story wasn't about that. But that's what happens. What do? Am I gonna quit writing? Absolutely not. I love this. This is my favorite thing in the world. I love telling stories. And I guess it's different for me because I'm always working on a project. So that's why like the instant I release this book, I'm not gonna be refreshing the page for reviews. I'm gonna be already working on the next novel and the next novel after that. So I guess it's different for me. Dear viewer, you got a bad review. You got someone saying really mean things to you, or things that cut you. What if people never connect with my characters? What if people never like my characters? What if everyone hates what I do? Why should I keep on making it if nobody likes it? Well, I can tell you that the silent people, the people who buy your content and read it, most of them are indeed quiet. Mostly because they probably enjoyed what you make. They liked it and had nothing bad to say about it. Or there were minor things not big enough to warrant writing a review. People read our content, and life goes on. Everybody's living their own lives. I don't expect every single person who picks up my content to actually, leave a review. Life's too short to leave a review on every single book you've read. At the end of it all, though, I'm thankful for anyone who stopped to read my content. I may not always read the reviews. I'm telling you, one really good thing you could do is just, not be constantly refreshing that reviews page. Feedback is important, but the feedback that matters the most is the feedback from the people you trust. The people who understand what you're trying to do here. The people who treat your writing harshly, but harshly because they want it to be good. Because they want it to be great. And if you don't happen to have anyone who can help you in that way, do what I do sometimes. What helps me is to be harsh on my own writing. To read it with the mindset of someone who would not give me a fair shot. To be harsh on my writing, not because I hate it, but to be harsh on my writing because I want it to be great. That helps. It helps to get in that mindset. But at the end of it all, this question is not about feedback. This question is about the will to go on. What do we do when things seem hard? You love the writing. You told me that on your message. Keep on writing. Keep on working on the next book, and then the next book after that. I wanna believe that you're not in this profession to get one book and then get out. I don't know about you, but right there on my wall I have written, the single belief that I've held since the moment I began this journey. Long when I realized that all my life had been telling stories, with characters scribbled along the margins of notebooks. I want to fill the world with stories. That right there is my singular mission. So get back to writing and get back to telling stories. Okay? Okay. Oh man, I went long on that question. Oh no, I've gone so long. Let me just look at my little guide here while I talk about that. Question number 2. Oh my god. Question number 2. Someone asked me a question recently. If you don't know, if you have found me through searching on the internet for podcasts about writing advice, I, not so long ago, actually that was like 3 years ago, but a few years ago, don't mind me stumbling on my words, I released a video on YouTube called How to Plan Your Novel from the Ground Up. Also, if you want a little piece, like the best thing, you know what, I'm back to talking about reviews. Comments on YouTube are a great microcosm of how ineffective feedback can be. I remember getting a comment on my guide, which is a 1-hour workshop where I walk you through my entire process of how I plan a novel. And I remember I just got a comment, all lowercase, saying clickbait. And I'm like, or saying this video was clickbait. And I'm like, it isn't. It wasn't. Way to miss the point there, buddy. I have no idea how someone left that comment. But anyhow, on that very same video, someone was asking me, hey Max, how long should the process of planning a novel usually take? And my belief has been that the shorter, the better. Mostly because, and anyone who has been through this can tell you about it. If you're watching this on YouTube, feel free to leave your horror stories in the comments below. It's very easy to spend years of your life planning a novel instead of actually writing the darn thing. So it's been my belief to just jump into it. To just plan out the story, figure out the actors, the stages, and the scenes of the play that is your story, and just start writing. Just start writing. What? But Max, I don't know the names of all the fantasy organizations. Just start writing. Figure it out as you go. But what? But Max, I don't know my character's last name. I don't know what their superpower does. Figure it out as you go. You have a character, you have a place, you have a thing that may or may not happen in your story. That is good enough to start. And you should probably start, because writing a book takes a long time. And you will learn more by doing the writing part than by planning about doing the writing part. And as a little bit of a word of warning, you think to yourselves, but Max, if I don't plan the story, it's gonna be more work later on when I have to revise it. Trust me, I outlined plenty of how my antagonist in this novel would behave, and then through revision I realized, whoops, guess what? Outlining Max, the version of me that outlined the novel, was super wrong. And now, revision Max, the version of me that has to revise this, is had to roll up their sleeves and get down there and change every single line of dialogue spoken by the antagonist. And several parts of narration as well, because some things no longer make sense when you take out the words someone said. I think it's wiser to just jump in. What if you don't know? What if something comes up? Things will always come up. Because writing is part of life, and life finds a way to get in the way. as a bit of an added note, you may be thinking, Max, you're breezing through this question. Yeah, because it may or may not be related to the next segment. But the thing I want to say is this. I do my best brainstorming and outlining when I am not at my desk. I come up with my best ideas when I'm in the shower, or when I'm walking, or when I'm washing dishes. I put on music, and I just think. Car rides, bus rides, being in motion, feeling the motor of a car, and seeing the world around me become a blur. That right there is the perfect place to brainstorm a story. Or to come up with elements. I can't tell you. Even right now as I'm editing, it's the exact same story. I go out on my walk every single morning with music on, and in the course of 30 minutes of walking, I remember, oh my god, I should probably point this out during that one scene. I completely forgot about this. I realized this character said this thing and it actually never comes back. I discover things to do. I discover things that I wouldn't have otherwise by waiting at my desk for ideas. As that old saying goes, ideas will not find you at your desk. They will find you when you're doing something else. So when I brainstorm a story, I make sure to get the foundations done. Sometimes in the course of half an hour, scribble them, create the foundations, imagine a mental image for my world and my characters and what I think should happen in the story, and then I stop. I go, I get back to living. I spent a couple mornings having really long walks, all the way back up to my old college, down by the creek, enjoying nature, enjoying music. And in the course of just doing that, the rest of the pieces come to me. And I'm not trying to do the whole, like, it's magic, but you have to give it time. Stories need to germinate in your mind, because your story is a seed, and it grows in your mind across the field of your imagination. Now, you may be thinking, Max, this is nice and all, but like, how long should it actually take to brainstorm a story? How long should it take to plan a novel using your own process? And I could spend more time explaining, more time giving you more examples about how it should be really brief. Or I thought, well, I could just show you how fast it can be. So welcome. We're going to be moving over to the third segment of the show, the prompt. Though this time is not really a prompt, more as it is a live performance, because today, right before your eyes, look, nothing under the sleeve, nothing under this other sleeve, nothing in my hat. Today, I will be performing no illusionism, no sleight of hand, no trick, no magic. The real deal. I'm going to brainstorm a novel before your eyes, following the method that I do. I'm going to be breezing through it pretty hard. If you are interested, you can watch an old video with a very young me, very young as in 3 years ago. You can just search on YouTube for How to Plan a Novel from the Ground Up by M. Kieran or Mr. Kieran. There might also be a link in the description of this video. I will go in full length in that video, but for now, I'll just move through it relatively quickly. Instead of a prompt this week, I'll just literally walk you through what I would do to show you just how fast it will go. Because like I mentioned, when I brainstorm a novel, I want to get the foundational stuff done. I want to have a mental image of who my characters are, what they look like, what the central core of the story might be, and then I go out, I walk, I take plenty of showers, and I let that story idea, that story seed, germinate inside of my imagination. That part right there takes time, but you are going to be better off letting it sit, letting it bloom and grow while you're not thinking about it than just sitting at your desk brainstorming organization names and city names and drawing fantasy maps. I know everybody loves the fantasy map, but trust me, a better use of your time is to brainstorm the story, think about it in the midst of living, and start writing. So, I'm not going to be writing the story at this moment. I'm in the middle of revision, but I am going to, live before your very own ears, going to write out the outline for a novel. I have a very small piece of paper in front of me. I would say that it is about 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. It is the size of a sticky note, but it's not sticky because Staples lied to me. And I'm going to be following the steps of my guide to how to plan a novel. The first thing, the most important thing at the very beginning, is to ask ourselves what is the most exciting thing? What drives us right now? What is exciting? What do we want to write about? There's a world of possibilities, and if you were to boil it down to one thing, or usually 3 things, what would it be? The story that I want to write is a sequel to a Choose Your Own Adventure game that I made called Ho-Ho and the Fabulous Gays. It is a game that I made about a group of people who had superpowers based on the people who they were in a previous lifetime. Hoshinaga is the main character of that story, and in that game it was told in second person, but Hoshi's character still bled through the choices and the things that you could say during that game, so I kind of really wanted to tell a story about them because they're lovely, and everybody in that book is queer AF, so I thought, you know what, I want to write more stories about these characters. So I'll be brainstorming a novel about those characters. Thinking about it, I would like to write a novel focused on the main character. There's a whole cast of characters, and I can definitely take them one character at a time. I'm thinking of a novella, and as for the root elements of a story, the things that are launching me to write a story about something, I want to write a sequel to Ho-Ho. Ho-Ho and the Fabulous Gays. Probably just titled The Fabulous Gays, something. The things that excite me are a bunch of queer AF powerful people. And last but not least, I want to analyze the past of Ho-Ho. Ho-Ho, being the protagonist of the game, didn't actually get a lot of color. There was some color in there, but I actually want to do a full dive into who Ho-Ho, or Hoshinaga, happens to be. So, Ho-Ho's past is one of the things that excites me. So, what am I excited for in this project? I want to write a sequel to that wonderful, interesting world that I created. I want it to be about powerful people who happen to be all LGBT+, and I want to explore Ho-Ho's past. Considering these root elements that I'm horribly writing by hand, I'm going to create a story about Ho-Ho's past. Now, for this story, we need, or for any kind of novel, we need 3 things. We need faces, we need places, and we need events. I mean, you can also have things, I guess, like concepts and ideals, but that's something else. As for the faces that I need for the story, well, clearly I need the titular Ho-Ho, Ho-Ho, also known as Hoshinaga, wielder of Maze, Days, and Haze. That's a joke for like 2 people. I also need, of course, the rest of their friends, whose names are escaping me right now because I'm in the middle of doing 3 tasks at once, one of which is writing by hand. All of Ho-Ho's friends, which is 1, 2, 3, of course. I also need Ho-Ho's trusty steed, also known as their bike. For this story, I would also like to spend a little bit of time introducing the main antagonist of their series, the Disaster Party. So introduce the Disaster Party so that we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 characters so far. In a story, new characters will always come up, so I always like to start out small. For this story, the faces that I'm going to need is going to be Ho-Ho, all of Ho-Ho's friends, Ho-Ho's bike, which may or may not be sentient, don't worry about it, and I want to lay the foundations for the antagonist of the story, the Disaster Party. I wanted to write it all in one sticky note, but I'm running out of space. I can't kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Wait a minute. There is a backside to this page. Oh, okay, you know what? 200 IQ, let's go. I got a new plan. I'll use both sides of the sheet. The people that I need for this story, again, Ho-Ho, friends, motorcycle, antagonist. The places where this story takes place, well, clearly the story has to take place in Ho-Ho's apartment. One of Ho-Ho's friends works at a cafe, and I think it'll be funny if they all hang out at that cafe. So I'm gonna type cafe. I can't think of anywhere else where I think the story would take place. I definitely want Ho-Ho and the antagonist to like meet up somewhere, but I can't think of anything right now. Nothing's jumping at me. You should always go with whatever jumps at you first, by the way. It should be your gut feeling. You should never have to dig down for characters or concepts. Why? Because characters, places, and events will come up as you write the story. That bears repeating. More stuff will come up as you write your novel. So you don't have to be digging down for ideas. Trust me. Don't... What's a good metaphor for this? Grab the fruit that is ready to be picked. Don't be yanking at the branches for the fruit to come off the branches. Things will come your way. The only other location that I can imagine, and this is a very meta location, because the location would be Ho-Ho's memories, because I want to explore Ho-Ho's past. How did this person come to be? How did they end up here? I never got to touch on that on the game, so I really want to explore that. Mostly because I actually don't know Ho-Ho's story. I don't know where Ho-Ho came from, and I actually want to figure out how they discovered their own powers as well. Also, don't mind the dogs barking in the background. I hope you can't hear that. I can hear it. It's really loud. So the last location, for the sake of just, adding it here, Ho-Ho's memories. So in a story, we need faces, the people who are the active players in a story, the locations, the stages for the play, and the events. The events, I use them as the roadmap for the story, the events that should maybe hopefully happen in the story. These are not written in stone, or carved in stone. These are the things that maybe hopefully will happen in the story. And clearly, just thinking about this, I like to think of... this is such a nerdy thing to say. I like to think of geometry or symmetry, things that make sense. If I'm going to be exploring Ho-Ho's past, I should also explore their present and their future. That right there clearly makes sense. So an event, I want to have an event that tackles the past, or several, an event that tackles the present, and an event that tackles the future. And I think the future can immediately be connected to the antagonist, the present can be connected to the friends, and the past can be connected to wherever Ho-Ho came from. That right there, just really quick kind of grasping of the events of the story. You could argue that I just literally wrote you the 3-act structure for the story, but I never get down that deep. Just thinking about this, thinking about it out loud, is giving me ideas. And it's very important to always register all of those ideas. I recommend just grabbing a notebook and just carrying that notebook with you wherever you go. You can also have apps for stuff like that. But right now my phone has been really terrible and it just dies and cannot hold a battery charge. So guess what? I'm carrying a notebook with me. That one never runs out of batteries. So I want a scene in the past, because I want to know where Ho-Ho came from. So clearly something about the past. Something about the present. I actually don't even know what Ho-Ho does for a living. I almost feel like Ho-Ho probably just... No, well, they don't couch surf because another friend couch surf. And they all can't be endless losers like that. So, you know what? I'm going to write a question right here. What does Ho-Ho does for a living? Or do for a living? During the act of brainstorming a story, I also like to write down questions. The first step of brainstorming a story, following my method, I know I'm going really fast through it, but it's But it's to show you, to make the point that you can move through this really quickly. And you probably should move through it really quickly. Maybe not do it in the course of a segment in a podcast, like I am, me being a crazy person. But not focus 3 hours or like one poor view or like 2 weeks to brainstorming a story. Definitely not that. You need people to make things happen, places where the story takes place or is set, and events that maybe should happen. I also like to write down questions. The next step is to actually focus and to narrow those elements. The thing that I like to do is to go through every single character, through every location, and through every event, and to give them more of a form. This doesn't have to be in one sitting. I like to do it over, sessions in between things. I like back when I worked at a laboratory, I would do it during my breaks. Just to, I have 10 minutes to do whatever I want right now. Let's brainstorm what this character actually looks like. And asking questions. What do they do? Where do they live? Where do they work? What do they look like? How do they feel about this person? And the process of this is to start big, grabbing the immediate ideas that come to mind, and to slowly give them form. You don't even have to go super deep on a character and come up with everything. Just, to me, having a mental image of who they are helps. Because when you have a mental image of who they are, you can imagine them in your mind. And I'm not talking about a mental image of who they are as a person with values and beliefs. Who they are as an image. What do they look like? Thankfully, I know what Ho-Ho looks like. I've written about them before, and I have a very clear mental image of them. So for me, this part of the process is way simpler. I picture them, and by picturing them, I can imagine them in my mind when I'm walking, when I'm listening to music. I can imagine them and the antagonist, and thinking, well, they look like this, and they behave like this. Where would they meet? How would they stumble upon one another? What would be the coolest way for them to meet? What would be the most horrible, heartbreaking way for the story to advance? And it becomes a matter of alchemy through question marks. Asking questions and imagining the world. But all of that happens in the background. It happens while you're doing other stuff. That's why in my list of steps for brainstorming a novel, when I'm doing it on my own, I have started allocating just days to just go on walks. Days when the active task is not to sit at my desk and just, write out family trees. All that stuff, all those things that you think are vital for the story are actually not that set in stone. You can modify the family tree, and sometimes you will during revision. I have a friend who finished doing the big beta draft for their novel, and they ended up having to take out an entire character. Just think about that. An entire character who had to be brainstormed. An entire character who appeared in the story, who by the end of the revision process, my writerly friend realized, this person doesn't need to exist. Sometimes you don't know what you need. Sometimes you think you do, but you can't be sure. That's why, from my point of view, I always like to come up with a foundation. What do I got here? I have a group of 4 queer AF friends who happen to have superpowers. And one of them we're going to be focused on. Hoshi Hoshinaga, leader of this group of superpowered people, who happens to be aware of 3 different incarnations of themselves, 3 different people who they were in previous lives. And through that alignment of the lenses of their person enables them to do things unlike anyone else. I actually should probably review their superpowers as well to make sure that I'm not being silly, but all those things I can think about later. And I don't have to have all the answers. All I need to start thinking about a story, to start letting it have mass in my mind, are the people, the places, and the events that should maybe hopefully happen in the story. When you have that, not to be funny with geometry, but the lines connect. 3 lines become a triangle, and inside that triangle there's an area. an area where your story takes place and takes form. If these are the main players, if this is the location, and these are the boundaries for the events in the story, then the endless fabric of what could be and what you could write about, it's narrowed down to a set of quadrants. Or whatever the equivalent would be for a three-pointed figure. This here is where the story takes place. Not in the endless, boundless possibilities of what could be. The endless, boundless possibilities of your imagination. No. Within this region of what could be and what may be, here, in this set of 3 lines, this right here, this triangle, is where the story exists. And if you can imagine it, through your imagination, you build the portal to it. And you can start taking from it, giving it form, making it real. To me, is walking. To you, it may be something else. Working on your garden. Staying up at night, in that moment between sleepiness and sleep. Looking up at your ceiling. Seeing the grooves on the finish on the ceiling. And seeing faces and images. The shape of hills. And places that don't exist, but they do in your imagination. In that moment between sleepiness and sleep. In between those moments, when you're fully aware and you're thinking, and the rest of the world, the thoughts of the day, the worries, they're all gone. You have a moment of clarity. Meditation with your pillow as your only companion. And then you think to yourselves, what if my main character did this? That right there is the magic. And you can't emulate that by sitting at your desk. You can't crunch that. You can't grind through that. And even if you could, I think you're better off coming up with characters, places, and events. Asking questions about them. And thinking about them in the time between living and the time when you sit down to write. Because your story will change. Your story will evolve. To think that it won't is a little short-sighted. Writing is the act of discovery. And though I think I may know in what quadrant, in what part of the map the island that I'm looking for is, I set sail, and through words and paper, I sail across the inky waves, and I may know where it is, but I am not likely to find it there. Through the search and the discovery, we get lost, but we always end up where we're meant to be. Don't hesitate. You will never know enough of your world to be ready, so don't be ready. Jump in, set sail, and see where the story takes you. And welcome to the 14th episode of Omakase, my writing advice and inspiration podcast. I hope that was helpful. A part of me feels that it probably wasn't, and it's one of those things where, like, I bet someone out there's gonna think, oh no, Max, great scripted content, and I'm like, I don't do scripts. You think I do scripts? Absolutely, that's too much work. I just spent 20 minutes telling you about how I don't spend weeks brainstorming characters. You think I'm spending weeks brainstorming what I'm going to say on this podcast? Absolutely not. I speak from the heart. That right there is my approach to all things. Do it from the heart. And sometimes I say clever things. That's not true. I mean, really, if you keep taking shots at the dartboard, you're eventually gonna get a bullseye. But I actually really like the geometry that I had. Yeah, of course. If I want to have a story about Ho-Ho's past, it should also involve the present and the future. And when I thought about that, I'm like, oh my god, I'm so smart, you guys. Oh my god, I should write books about it. That actually makes too much sense. And I'm like, okay, clearly we have a whole series of chapters about Ho-Ho's past and how Ho-Ho ended up in the city, not couch surfing. I actually have no idea what Ho-Ho does for a living. I have to figure that out, but that'll take a walk or two. And if I do that, clearly I should also have a series of scenes about the present, where Ho-Ho is right now, about Ho-Ho's friends, about, what happened with that and with that other thing. And of course, if we are talking about the present, we must also talk about the future, what's coming up. Who is that mysterious stranger who calls themselves the Disaster Party? That's good. You can't script that. That's too no, that's not true. That's too clever. Man, all in a 3.5 by 3.5 sheet of paper. Both sides, because I needed some of that. Of course, that's not the entire process. It isn't. But like I told you, I prefer to spend less time brainstorming and more time just writing. Because books take a long time, and I think you're better off just jumping into the writing. No amount of outlining and brainstorming is gonna make the act of writing less scary. Okay? Okay. I hope someone found that fun. I'm getting self-conscious about it, and I'm like, is this the worst segment I've ever done? Sorry, I'm getting tickled by the idea of someone going into the comments of this video and just posting, "This was clickbait," and I'm like, don't you dare leave that comment. That comment was so dumb. That's the dumbest comment. I made a 1-hour guide titled "How to Plan Your Novel from the Ground Up," where I talk about planning your novel from the ground up for an hour, and some person is like, clearly this is clickbait, and I'm like, it isn't. It wasn't. Did you watch the video? Alright. Hey guys. Welcome to the end of the podcast. This one went long, I apologize, but I hope that you had fun, and I hope that if anything, I showed you another point of view. Thank you for listening. I hope that between now and the next time we meet that you get some writing done, and if that you're brainstorming, that you push through the brainstorming stage as quickly as humanly possible, and that you start writing. Jump in. You don't have to know everything before you start. All you need to do is to put pen to paper and begin writing. And now, with all that done, feel free to go home. Don't mind me opening. Oh my god. Wait, no, this is not the right page. This is the right page. Feel free to go and have a lovely day. Because now, welcome to the end of the video club, where we stay until the end of the video. This is the section of the podcast where I like to just take a moment and give a shout out to every single one of the lovely people supporting me on patreon.com/mkaren, and everyone pledging $1 and up gets me to butcher their names. Also, if you treat me to a cup of coffee, I will also shout you out. We don't have any coffee donations this week, but you could get a shout out if you were to leave me a donation or pledge $1. $1 a month to get these podcasts early is a crazy deal, I'm just saying. And now, to begin, the marvelous shout-out. The shout-outening? The shout-outening. Have I mentioned that for the end of the video club, I don't do edits, so you get to have those dumb jokes that otherwise would get edited. How long is the original audio file, Max, for when you record the podcast? About 2 hours long, but I cut a lot of it out. a lot of the really dumb jokes. But dumb jokes aside, I want to give a shout out to every single one of my lovely sponsors, beginning alphabetically assorted by Patron. A. Howard, Adelac, Alistair Baywood, Elisa Dudley, Amanda Stevens, Amelia, Amy Palmer, Angela, Aniexo Hoshi, Biting the Sun. Oh yeah, oh here it comes, everybody's favorite, Blarg. I gotta give it for Blarg. Gotta give it for Blarg. Blarg submit a patron for 29 months. That just shocks me every time. For how long has Amelia been a patron? Because I feel like Amelia has been like, yeah, Amelia has been here since day one. 46 months. That's crazy. Amelia's so good too. Amelia's so good. I love Amelia. Amelia's the best. I'm sorry, guys. I've called it. I have called it. Amelia is the best, but you're all pretty good too. Brenda, C.E. Richards, Caitlin, and the other Caitlin, Cannibal Lily, Carriette Eccleston, Kathy Lindsay, Lishadra, Christiane, Christine Dennis, Kristen Lofton, Citro. I read Citro in my Mexican accent, but wouldn't it be funny if that's supposed to not be read in a Spanish accent? What if it was like Citro? Citro? That doesn't sound right. I'm gonna keep reading it as Citro. Clem Pastor, Dwayne Jackson, Eleanor, excuse me, Eleanor, and Aerosos, who has not changed their username from being in all caps and having 3 exclamation points, so guess what? I'm gonna keep shouting that name. Literally shout that name. Gilbert Gaudreau, Heather Tasker, Irina Phoenix, Isabella Doucette. I hope I got... Oh my god, you're all so close together. Gilbert Gaudreau, Isabella Doucette, and Janusz Hebatsky are all super close together. Those were all names that gave me so much trouble. Jaytana Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams. By the way, in case you're wondering, Isabella, like, Max, how did my name give you trouble? It's the C part. Because I thought, well, it must be Duchette. But no. I mean, the pronunciation guide I found online was like, no, it's pronounced Doucette. And I'm like, French. That's French for you. That's French, isn't it? I don't know. It's the French names. How dare I? How dare I read the word like it's written? The gal. Jaytana Kirkwood, Jeffrey James Williams, Joe, Juan Nunes, K.M. Anderson. I'm not bitter about that. That's just my joke. That's my recurring joke, to be like, how dare I read a word like how it's written? How dare I? Kameshwar Rao Shaluri, Kaylee, Kiel, Kit Lee, Lazy, Lier Killo, MT Locatelli, Mark Maruska, Mary Foster Smith, Nicola, Nicole Grissom. I need water. That's right, no edits today. Let's go, boys, no edits. Nicole Grissom, Nikolai, Noam Sahar, Novels and Tomes, Pablo, Pat Eichson, Polly Craftool, Raquel Fernandez, Roa, Shimmer Tales, Sky, D. White, Soul Muse, Sylvia Leitilla, Synexia, Thomas Baker, and Wendy, Christopher. Hey everybody. No edits. No edits. Welcome to the end of the video club, where we stay until the end of the video. You don't have to stay until the end of the video. That's a joke. See, the joke is that people don't usually stay until the end of the video. So, do you get it? The joke is... that's how you know. There are no edits in this, because that joke wasn't funny. But it's fine. Hey there! Welcome. Life gets in the way. Not sometimes, but one might argue all the time. Every week, like on a sitcom, there's something going on, something happening. And that doesn't mean that we can never be at peace. That means that we should cherish and be grateful for the moments where there is nothing bad at the moment. Where life is peaceful for once. Life isn't all suffering. And I want to inspire you to cherish and to enjoy the moments of peace and the moments of silence. Make life the best that you can. We cannot change the way things are right now. A rainy day is a rainy day, and that's it. But we can learn to love rainy days. And we can learn to, in spite of how life may throw punches our way, we can learn to roll with the punches, get up, and get back to living.